Yesterday, and he said you can tell straight away. I think one of the best things about Christianity and being a Christian is that we have a framework and a life belt for a bad day, don't we? We have a framework to deal with and a life ring to save us in the bad day. How do people cope with a bad day, or indeed a bad year, or indeed a bad decade without Christ? I really don't know. I'd love to know, because I don't think it can be done. Job is probably, I think, the best book in the Bible to help us with a bad day or a bad decade. It is a strange book, the book of Job. It is a confusing book at times. It is a tough read. It is long. I mean, the first chapter itself is quite long. The whole book is 42 chapters long. And it comes to a rather perplexing conclusion at the end. There is a happy ending, a really happy ending. But actually there's lots of bits of the story along the way that never really gets tied up. In a way, though, the book itself feels a little bit like our sufferings along the way. There is a happy ending, but along the way there are no neat conclusions, and it's a tough journey getting there, just like our problems and our sufferings often are. In that way, I think the book of Job is a wonderful book for us. Because it's not like the friend who comes up to you and says, "Oh, don't worry," when they've heard you've had a bad day. "It'll be all right. Try this, try that," and immediately offers loads of really helpful solutions to you. It's not like that. No, it's not. It's like the friend who will sit with you, who will weep with you, who will talk it over and absorb the bad day that you're having and make it feel just a little bit better. The book of Job is Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, isn't it? When he weeps. He knows what he's about to do for Lazarus, and yet he weeps still. So what happens to poor Job then? I could actually do with a Job to help me for a moment. Anybody, it doesn't, boy, girl, somebody, anybody who'd like to be Job for me? Sophie, come and be Job for me. Fantastic, first hand to go up. Brilliant with your prayers earlier on. You can be Job for me. Here we are. Can you stand and face everybody else? This is Job in the middle here. Great, excellent. Our Job was actually a really special guy. Amazing person was Job. He was a farmer, and he was a very rich farmer. He had a lot of sheep. He had a lot of camels. It's the closest I could get to, I'm afraid, in our house. He had a lot of camels. Can you hold the camel for us? He also had a lot of donkeys as well. Pretty close. Close enough. Okay, a lot of donkeys. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of all of the above. And he also had quite a few oxen as well. Can you have your oxen? Okay, fantastic. I mean, he had so many of them that he couldn't hold them all. There we go. He had so many, was Job. He was an upright person, blameless before the Lord. We don't really know where he comes from. He lived in a land called Uz, a place called Uz, or Uz, which no one's really quite worked out where Uz was. And no one really knows when Job lived either. He's a very perplexing character, but he was rich, he was wealthy, he was upright, he was decent, and he lived in a place called Uz. Now, Job, oh, you dropped your oxen. God, dear, that's nothing like the bad day you're about to have, I tell you. Okay, Sophie, otherwise known as Job, you also have a large family and lots of servants. Okay, so I thought that we would split the church in half for a moment. Which side would you like to be your servants, and which side would you like to be your family? Okay, I mean, I know there's some of your family here, but they won't take offence if you call them servants. So which side would you like this lot to be your family, or your children, your sons and daughters? Because you had lots of them. Or would you like that lot to be your sons and daughters? What do you reckon?
Servants, sons and daughters.
Servants, okay. So you're all servants, and you had a lot of them, and sons and daughters. You actually had 3 daughters and 4 sons, but there were lots of other members of your family as well. So these are your children, and these are your servants. Okay. Are you all right holding all that?
Yeah.
Okay, you're all right holding all that. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so then, unfortunately, Job's very bad day begins. First, the Sabines attacked. The Sabines attack. And you lose all your oxen over there, dead, and your donkeys, dead. And we've got some Job emojis on the screen to help us. Here's the first Job emoji. If you don't know what a Job emoji is, it's something to do with those things on your phone. I don't really know what they are either. I've never sent one. And if you do, get a life, really. There's our first Job emoji on the screen. Because Job, he is in the world of pain. Because the Sabines attack and he loses all his oxen and his donkey. Where's the donkey gone? Oh, it's there. Okay, it's been resurrected already. Okay, that's the first bit of Job's very, very bad day. Then there is a lightning strike. Even more shocked Job emoji. And Job loses all his sheep. And, I'm afraid, all his servants. Is that your side? Oh. All the servants, unfortunately, end up being ex-servants, if you know what I mean. Very bad day. But the very bad day continues. And I told you it was a bad day for Job, because then the Chaldeans attacked. And we thought the Sabines were pretty bad. Well, the Chaldeans, oh my goodness, even more shocked Job emoji. And he loses all his camels, and the rest of his servants. That's you lot over there. So the rest of his servants, oh, there we go. All in one day. Terrible. So we've had the Sabines attack, we've had the lightning strike and the fire come, we've had the Chaldeans attack, and all the camels and all the rest of it, and all the servants become ex-camels, servants, oxen, and the like. All in one day. But I'm afraid it gets even worse. Even worse. A desert hurricane hits the feast where his children have been feasting. The house collapses and the whole family dies. Utterly devastated Job emoji. No, back. There we go. Utterly devastated Job emoji, I'm afraid. At this, Job got up, tore his robe, and shaved his head. Let me get my razor. No. And he fell to the ground. He fell to the ground? Poor old Job. Oh dear, crying Job emoji we've got now. It's the blackest of all bad days, isn't it? Oh, hang on a minute. The family looking quite alive still. I'm afraid. Yeah. Oh. Morris is down. We won't better get back up again. Okay. Job, up you get, Job. Up you get, Job. Job, you're all right. Can we have a little round of applause for Job? Off you go, Job. Thank you very much. That's great. That's great. Well, it is the most terrible of days. I mean, it's horrendous. I mean, it's almost unbelievably horrendous, isn't it? And perhaps some have suggested that actually the story is a kind of allegory. Although I'm inclined to think that actually Job was a real person, because, well, James, as we heard in the New Testament at the beginning of our service, referred to him as though he was a real person. So real person or not, nevertheless, it's a tale of terrible woe, isn't it? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Well, ultimately, it's not because Job had done anything wrong. In fact, he'd done absolutely nothing to deserve it. He was upright and blameless, which is what we hear at the beginning of in the first few verses of Job. The reason it happened was actually, and this is the troubling reason, God let it happen. That is the troubling answer. Why did it happen? God let it happen. Well, God, as we heard, and Satan, the devil, have been talking. That's the scene that we are presented with in verse 6 of our reading. They've been talking. God is so proud of Job because Job has done everything right and he's been blessed hugely by God. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him," he says to the devil. "He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." But you see, the devil thinks that Job is a sham, that he only follows God because God has blessed him. His toaster's landed butter side up in his life so far. And that's the reason why Job is blameless and upright. Because he's come from a good background and he's done well and he's got things right and he's been blessed. And so Satan says to God, does Job fear God for nothing? If you take it all away from him, he will curse you. I guarantee it, says the devil to the Lord. You see, it's a troubling book, isn't it? You have blessed the work of his hands, he says, so that his flocks and his herds are spread out throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. How horrible. How horrible. But then don't we, all of us, sense that creeping doubt in our minds sometimes that, maybe I only follow God because, of my background or because the blessings that he's given me. Will I follow him when it's difficult? Oh, I'm not sure, maybe I won't. And that creeping doubt comes in. So God says to Satan, and this is probably the most difficult thing in the whole book of Job, and we'll have a bit of a fuller answer to it next week when we come to the next bit of Job. God then says, well, bring it on. Let's put Job to the test. Bring it on then. He says to Satan, the Lord says to him, very well then, everything he has is in your hands. He hands it over to Satan, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. That's the one condition he puts in. God allows it to happen. He's in control. He is sovereign. There's no question of that throughout the whole book of Job. But yet he allows this really bad day to hit for Job. Now, there's a few questions that might raise in our minds. I'm sure it probably does. And we'll have a fuller answer to them next week, as I said. But let's just rest on the fact of what happened to poor old Job. It was a great and unusual test for this great man. He was asked by God to prove here his faithfulness under the toughest of trials. Will Satan be proved right? That Job will then curse God when all his things are taken away? Or will God be proved right that this is truly a man who is faithful and just even when life is difficult? Well, we'll have to see, won't we? But I think there's one principle that we can learn this morning and one lesson to be learned. A principle to hold on to and a lesson to be learned. And the principle is this, and it's a tough principle. But sadly, as we've all testified already, one way or another, bad things do happen to good people. Bad things happen to good people. There is much blessing in life. Of course there is. But our blessings in life are nothing to do with our own merit, nothing to do with our goodness. It's all about God's grace. Our suffering has nothing to do with our sin as well, our own sufferings, at least not directly. Obviously, if there's something in some particular area of life that we constantly get wrong, well, there may well be consequences from it, and I'm sure you can probably think of obvious examples. But there's not a direct link. There's not a direct link between how we live our lives and the blessing or the lack of it that we might have in our lives. And this is where I think this is a good analogy. It's not my analogy, it's one I've read somewhere else. Can we go to the next picture of the earthquake? Can you see? This is actually somewhere in Italy, before and after the earthquake, the same street. You see, life in this world is like navigating a city that's been part ruined by an earthquake. That's what life in this world is like. You see, if you navigate a city after an earthquake, on the right-hand side there, you can see there's still vaguely a road there. And if we follow that road, we'll sort of vaguely find our way. That's what it's like in a city after an earthquake. And life can be like that. When sin came into the world with Adam and Eve, and we're all part of that story, it's like the world has been suffered an earthquake. We can see the form of perfection. The old ways, the ways in which it was supposed to be, are still there. But yet everything is ruined and out of joint. So if we follow the old ways, if we follow the original streets, the perfection that God had in mind from the beginning, well, then things will tend to go better. Of course they will. If we work hard and we're faithful and we keep God's commands, then generally life will be better. But because sin has so infected the world, it's never as simple as that, is it? Every now and again, a pile of rubble will be in our way. Will be a wreck that we'll need to clamber over. There will be some immovable object that we need to try to get round. That is what life is like in creation after the fall of mankind. It's like trying to navigate a city that's been affected by an earthquake. The original and perfect form is still recognizable on a beautiful day like today, very recognizable. But yet it's going to be tough going, and it is for all of us, isn't it? The principle here is that until Jesus returns, until the perfection of heaven, bad things happen to good people. Not because we've deserved it or otherwise, or no, it's just what happens in the world that God has come to rescue. But there's a lesson for us to learn. That's the principle, now the lesson. We've got a choice to make, haven't we, when that happens? When we hit the rubble in the road, we've got a choice to make. And listen to the choice that Job makes, verse 20 of our reading. At this, Job got up and tore his robe, or rent his garment in twain, as we had in Bondi this morning. I like that. Rent his garment in twain. He shaved his head. He fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord has given, and the Lord has taken away," as we sung in our song earlier on. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then the commentator writes in the letter, in the book of Job, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. See, we've got a choice to make, haven't we? Like Job, are we going to curse God when it goes wrong for us, when we hit that wreck in the road? Or are we going to nevertheless still be reverent in our worship of God through the suffering and through the pain? Well, Job never curses God. When we get to the end of the story in 42 chapters' time, we'll learn that he never cursed him. There is plenty of difficulty along the way. We'll come to that next time. But when suffering comes, we have a choice to make. Will we bow in reverent worship despite it, or will we curse God? Two ways to live, isn't it? And Job, all the way, points us to the better way, which is to keep coming to the Lord and pouring out our praises, but also our angst and our anger to him. Bring it to him. Bad things happen to good people, but then we have a choice to make when the bad day hits. Someone who's got Job open in their Bible, would you mind just flicking to chapter 19? I'd like someone just to read a little bit out for me. Who'd like to do some reading? Very short little bit. I'm going to wait until someone says yes. Come on, we're all cold. Frank, thank you. Can you go to Job chapter 19 for us and read from verse 23 to 27? Thank you.